welcome back to the pod. This is the entirety compilation of the Elder Scrolls crash course on the lore history of that game universe. If you already heard the 3 parts that were originally released, you don't need to re-listen to it unless you really want to, because as I said, this is just a compilation where everything's already just put back together.
So in the beginning, known as the Dawn Era, is essentially the beginning of everything in the Elder Scrolls universe, with the Aedra, the Potomic beings to help create the world, and it bleeds into the Merethic Era. The Daedric princes don't contribute anything to the creation, therefore that's why they're called the Daedra. The Aldmer, Dummer, Chimmer, Bosmer become essentially the first inhabitants of Tamriel and Trinabak, and Aedra becomes Malakath, whom is a Daedric prince as well. And then you have the Drini Tower, Erd Tower, Adamantine Tower, same tower was created. The construction of Drini Tower and the different elves arriving to Nirn start the Merethic Era. In the Elder Scrolls universe, there are planes of existence, the world of Nirn, the Daedric realms each Daedric prince controls. The Daedra, as I said, did not use any of their power. They just like doing their own thing. They're the most powerful beings in the Elder Scrolls universe. Think the Merethic Era as BCE/BC, as each numbered year is how many years before the start of the first era. Merethic Era being designated as ME in the timeline. If you want to know your Daedric princes, there are the following: Azura, Boethia, Clavicus Vile, Hermaeus Mora, Hirsine, Euthlia, Jigleg, Malakath, Mehrunes Dagon, Mephala, Meridia, Molagbal, Namira, Nocturnal, Pyrite, Sanguine, Vermina, and then finally a fan-favorite Daedric prince, Sheogorath. Anyways, in ME 250, the Drini Tower is constructed, the Aldmira's continent just disappears, and the Aldmer, who become the Altmer later on, arrive and settle on the island of Aridon, one of the 3 main islands of the Somerset Isles. In the middle of the Merethic Era, the Aldmeri search for Aldmeri's fails, but in doing so, the Aldmer chart the rest of Tamriel and settle there. The ones that make it to Cyrodiil become the Aelids, which do die out later on. The Argonians are already on Tamriel at the time, and Blackmarsh, also known as Argonia. The Crystal Tower is built in the Somerset Isles, and the White Gold Tower is built in Cyrodiil. Late Merethic Era, the Dwemer, also known as the Deep Elves, are dwarves. They're not like short, stocky little things. They're normal elves. They are free thinkers who devote their time to science, engineering, and alchemy, and establish underground cities in the Verothi Mountains between Skyrim and Morrowind. Trimac, as I said, becomes Malakath. The Chimmer become long-lived and become devoted to ancestor worship, despising the secular culture of the Dwemer, causing minor raids and territorial disputes in Morrowind, and the Verothi culture formed on Vardenfell, which is a giant island that the Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind takes place on. Sometime in the Merethic Era, human races begin to migrate to Tamriel, like from Yolkulda, which is where the Red Guards come from. Then you have the Nords, which come down from Atmora. Atmora is freezing over at that point. Dwemer freehold colonies are constructed in the late Merethic Era. The Verothi degenerate into the Ashlander tribes and become the great and minor houses of Morrowind. The first men and the Aldmer interbreed, which become the Bretons, humans that have elven blood, so think of them as like human-looking half-elves. Orcs are either discovered or appear in Craigorn region between High Rock, Hammerfell, and Skyrim. They just worship Malakath or Trinamac, depending on the orc tribe. The Proto-Nords, which become Nords, finish migrating to northern Skyrim. Ysgramor and his 500 companions attack the Falmer, aka Snow Elves, and the Knight of Tears, causing him to just run away and go into slavery underneath the Dwemer or fight them. Over time, this does turn them into modern Falmer that appear in Skyrim. The Dragon War happens, and the Nords start worshipping the dragons, and dragon priests are the head of, well, the servants. Dragon priests and most of the dragons lose the war after the men rose up with the help of a few of the dragons to rebel against tyranny. ME1 becomes 1E0 in Valenwood, which is the founding of the Cameron dynasty and the start of the First Era. Now, the First Era is when things start getting hectic between the centuries, because there's no games in the First Era, the Merethic Era, and the sheer amount of stuff that happens is exactly why this one is a crash course. If I made this a history lesson, this episode would become way too long for even my liking. A good YouTube channel with all the Elder Scrolls lore in depth is the channel called Imperial Knowledge. If you want a very good lore episode or channel, just go to the Elder Scrolls Lorecast. Anyways, the First Era is when everyone decided to start tracking dates, and King Elpir, the founder of the Cameron dynasty of Valenwood, declared it is the start of the First Era. When Ysgramor and the Nords were not satisfied with just Skyrim, they went on a conquering spree that took most of Morrowind, all of High Rock, and a decent-sized portion of Cyrodiil, which became the Nordic Empire. This was after committing genocide against the Snow Elves. The Chimmer declared war on the Dwemer after they decided to create a giant brass god. Uridil, Nerevar, Sultasil, Almexia, Vivek, and Dagoth were the leaders of the Chimmer forces against the Dwemer. The Dwemer activated their brass god way too early, and just about all of them disappeared off the planet. No one knows where the Dwemer went. There's a couple. You can meet one in Morrowind. The guy is a corpus disease, so he's just kind of immortal. He's bloated, is on these robotic spider leg looking things as a robotic lower half. And then after that whole shebang, Nerevar got killed, and then Almexia, Sultasil, and Vivek became the living gods of Morrowind, also called the Tribunal. The Azura, Daedric Prince, and was the primary focus of Chimmer worship, was unhappy about this and cursed the Chimmer, and this turns them into the Dunmer. Azura created the Nerevarine prophecy, and the Nerevarine prophecy takes place in Elder Scrolls 3 and Morrowind. Only the living gods and a few of the Chimmer were left at this time. Cyrodiil had a slave uprising against Aliads. These humans will conquer the rest of Cyrodiil. Aktosh gives Alicia the gift of the dragon blood and all of her descendants, which would have the dragon blood as well, on top of also receiving the Amulet of Kings, which is an amulet that keeps the Daedra from invading Nirn. Very important artifact. The Nordic Empire goes through a civil war, which makes them leave the provinces that are not Skyrim, and the Thracian plague unleashed by the Slode kills half the population of Tamriel. The Slode are toad slug-looking creatures. They're selfish necromancers. All Tamriel teams up for the All Flags Navy to declare war on the Slode and sink their kingdom. Turmoil in Tamriel happens for 500 years until Raymond Cyrodiil was born and was found with the Amulet of Kings in his forehead. He united all of Tamriel, or at least most of it, and then Tamriel was invaded by the Tzaki. This was the first Akavir invasion. They invaded via Skyrim, and Raymond Cyrodiil helped repel the Akavir invaders. The Akavir had bowed to Raymond, identifying him as Dragonborn, and then he just takes the Akavir army as his own. Raymond's children were all assassinated after his death, so the Akavir Prentate Viridujshai takes the Imperial throne. Alduin's Wall starts construction. Mehrunes Dagon destroys Mournhold, and Almexia and Sultasil banish Mehrunes Dagon back to oblivion. This has been your crash course of the Merethic and First Eras. The first year of the Second Era was started by the Akaviri Potentate on the 1st of Morningstar, one of the 12 months in the Elder Scrolls universe. It is also the marking of a new era which commemorates the demise of the Riemann dynasty. Nothing of note happens for 229 years after this. Then, the founder of the Mages Guild, Venice Galarian, whom players meet in ESO, leaves the Sigic Order and creates the Mages Guild. Clavicus Vile, Mephala, and Nocturnal make a deal with the Slode to acquire the Heart of Transparent Law. The leader of the Sigic Order makes a deal with Nocturnal for it to only be able to be read by mortal tongues. Then he hides the heart within himself, and due to Slode magic, forgets all about it, and the island of Artaeum just disappears. Artaeum is one of the 3 major islands of the Somerset Isles, and it just tends to just disappear when stuff's about to go down. Overall, I think it happened twice over the course of the Elder Scrolls history where it just disappears off the map. And the Sigic Order, quite frankly, doesn't like getting involved in stuff. And when they do get involved, it's just do little things here and there to make sure nothing breaks down even further. The Akaviri Potentate and his descendants, they all get assassinated. Skyrim splits between East and West Kingdoms, with 2 Jarls claiming to become High King. And then Jorn becomes High King of Skyrim. The Kamal and the Snow Demons invade. They're the same thing, and they're of Akavir, invade Tamriel, and then the Ebonheart Pact forms with Jorm teaming up with Almexia and the Dunmer, and bringing in some of the Argonians, 3 races in the Elder Scrolls universe that just typically just despise each other. They team up and defeat the Kamali invaders. Metamarco, one of the largest antagonists in the Elder Scrolls universe, betrays Varen Aquarios to use the Amulet Kings to become Dragonborn. Iren is crowned King of Alienor, and hence the Somerset Isles, and forms the first Aldmeri Dominion with Valenwood and Elsewire. The 3-banner war starts, and this starts the events of the Elder Scrolls Online, also known as ESO. The Plane Meld starts, which is the main focus of the main game of the ESO, because of Molag Bal and Metamarco. The Plane Meld ends in Second Era 582. Tyra Septim is born in Second Era 828 and uses the Numidium, the Dwemer Brass robot god, to conquer all of Tamriel in 1 banner. Thus begins the Third Era. Now, although ESO is over 10 years old, and since there is DLC still being made for it, I'm going to choose to not spoil any of it. Typically, if something's like 10 to 20 years old, spoilers are go wild. Who cares? It's that old. However, the game is still in development because DLC. So therefore, I recommend reading all about it or play ESO yourselves. I chose the Sorcerer class High Elf and the Dominion and enjoyed it a lot. My favorite zones are Aridon and the Somerset Isles. The Somerset Isles are part of the Somerset DLC. Aridon's just in the base game, and I haven't played it in a while, and therefore I've not completed the Somerset DLC yet. As I tend to play in spurts, there was a couple of run-ins with Sheogorath. Favorite quest so far, when I'm not doing stuff for the stuff involving the Queen's Eye, which is the Aldmeri Dominion's secret service, if you will. Year 0 of the Third Era, Tiber Septim conquers the Somerset Isles, and every province is now underneath his banner. The Era of the Septims. Tiber Septim also becomes Talos after he dies. Various civil wars and necromancers appear. Cameron Usurper leads an army of Daedra undead, going from Valenwood, going north into the Hammerfell region where they're, I believe, defeated. Uriel Septim V is born and later on in 2E88, tries to invade and conquer Akavir, does fail. Most of the important stuff that had happened in the Third Era happened at the end of the Uriel Septim VII and Martin Septim. Uriel VII is the most important emperor in the Elder Scrolls games and of the Third Era. The first game is called Arena. Long story short, Jagar Tharn betrays Uriel VII by trapping him inside a realm of oblivion and disguises himself as the Emperor with magic, triggering all that, and the Imperial Simulacrum takes place, or happens rather. The 5-year war breaks out, and regional wars break out across Tamriel. Jagar Tharn makes a deal with Mehrunes Dagon, and then at the end, Jagar Tharn is killed, ending the, not sending anything, it's just ending the Imperial Simulacrum. Game number 2 is Daggerfall. Takes place in Iliac Bay after Uriel, the real one, sends one of his agents, the player character, there. The plot runs around the Numidium and reactivating it. Due to the 6 endings and a dragon break, all endings are canon, yet uncanon at the exact same time because of activating the Numidium. There's a couple of dragon breaks that are too complicated to go over. One caused by Tiber Septum, so to save headaches, we will not be going over them at all. If you are interested in them, I advise you go research those yourself. Game number 3 is Morrowind. Now, for Morrowind, I also have included its DLCs. So the base game takes place on Vardenfell, Morrowind, and then the DLCs take place in mainland Morrowind and Solstheim. On Vardenfell, Dagoth Ur occupies the Chamber of Heart of Lorkhan, and the Tribunal need to visit it to keep their immortality and their powers. The Nerevarine appears, and as a reminder, the reincarnation of Nerevar is the Nerevarine. The Nerevarine destroys the Heart of Lorkhan and Dagoth Ur, which causes Almalexia to go insane and kill Sotha and try to kill the Nerevarine, but gets killed by the Nerevarine during that whole thing. And Vivek just disappears. And that little bit is essentially the plot of the DLC called Tribunal. The Blood Moon DLC is the Blood Moon prophecy happens in Solstheim, where Hircine performs a ritual hunt, and the Nerevarine is chosen to participate. Werewolves are part of this DLC. The Nerevarine stops this and just decides to go to Akavir and just disappears outright after that. Game number 4 is Oblivion. One of the more, Morrowind and Oblivion are the best 2 Elder Scrolls games ever made. Morrowind is extremely clunky, so I'm waiting for that to get playable in the Skyrim engine, so that way I can play Morrowind and experience the story. In Oblivion, Uriel Septim VII gets assassinated, and the Oblivion Gates open due to the acts of the Mythic Dawn Cult, which worship Mehrunes Dagon. Uriel Septim VII's heirs are also assassinated, excluding Martin. The Daedra kill a ton of people. Martin Septim sacrifices himself by turning into an avatar of Akatosh and permanently closes the portals to Oblivion. The Grey March happens in the Shivering Isles, and that planet of Oblivion is controlled by Sheogorath. Be right there in a moment. The little sidebar of the Knights of the Nine also get reestablished by Unknown Pilgrim. Now with the Grey March, a portal opens in the Nibian Bay, and the champion of Cyrodiil enters it. The Curse of Jiglag is broken at the end, and the champion of Cyrodiil goes through the mantling process and becomes Sheogorath. Now, the mantling process is a long process where, over time, the person who took up the mantle becomes what they took up the mantle that was there for. So, the player character of Oblivion, also known as the champion of Cyrodiil, transforms into Sheogorath, and all the memories of Sheogorath and the champion of Cyrodiil combine together and just become one. And it's a very long process, and they kind of lose themselves and become, again, what they took up the mantle to become. And who was Sheogorath, or in other words, Jiglag, just gets to permanently remain as Jiglag. So therefore, the curse of Jiglag, or Sheogorath, is broken. And then the first 200 years of the Fourth Era, Red Mountain, or Vardenfell is destroyed and Black Marsh secede. Valenwood and the Somerset Isles create another Almiri Dominion. The island of Artaeum disappears again. Umbril, a floating city, appears in Black March and starts floating towards Morrowind. The First Great War happens. The White Cold Concordat is signed, and then Hammerfell just secedes from the Empire and rejects the White Gourd Concordat. And then Fourth Era 201 is literally the events of Skyrim. Thank you for joining the entire crash course of the Elder Scrolls, and please listen to, enjoy, and get to know us, and let us know what you think. You can contact us at letschatbt@gmail.com. Go to the Facebook community group, on Twitter or X, wherever you decide to call it. You can also use the Discord. Till then, bye.